So last time, uh, we were talking about the Sheikh Al Akbar's entry into the Ard al Haqiqa or Ard Allah Wasi'ah. See, Joshua, if you could just mute all the other voices, please. Thank you. Um, that's good. And that is really the هي أرض العبودية. It's the land of servitude, perfect servitude. Whoever wants to be a perfect servant of God worships God in that land. And so he then sees God in all things. He sees God in all things. And then he was also able to marry off his sisters so he can continue on his quest in order to become an accomplished master, which takes us to the next stage of his quest, which is in Fez. And Fez is, of course, the citadel of Moroccan Sufism. It was there that Abu Median had chosen to pursue his training, and it was there that he had met his two masters himself. That means the two masters of Abu Median, Ibn Hurzahim and Abu Abdullah al-Daqqaq. And certainly, Sheikh Al-Akbar did not know these two masters, or I mean, he did not meet them, but he probably kept company with their students. So it was also in Fez that Ibn Arabi formed friendships with two notorious Sufis. Abu Abdullah al-Mahdawi, but that's not the same Mahdawi we were talking about last time. Abdul Aziz al-Mahdawi, this is a different one. Abu Abdullah al-Mahdawi is a different one. And Ibn Takhmist. It's a strange name, Ibn Takhmist. So then the historian Tadili tells us that the Mahdawi saved the population of the town in Fez from famine by distributing wheat to everyone, and that he spent 40 years in the Great Mosque seated facing towards the Qibla. And Ibn Arabi, for his part, confirms that Mahdawi, Abu Abdullah Mahdawi, was one of the Malamiya, and that he belonged to the spiritual category of what is called Ahlu Ashtiyaq, the men of ardent desires. So then, the Sheikh Al-Akbar tells us that these men, who are never more than five in number in any age, in any time period, are the men of the five obligatory prayers. So each one represents a particular prayer. And each one of them fully realizes one of the five obligatory prayers. What does that mean? Each one of them actualizes the reality of each prayer. So it's not just a series of movements, but it's something much more than that. It is through them that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maintains the existence of the world. Their verse in the book is observe the prayers and the middle prayer, Salatul Wusta, which is from Surah Al-Baqarah. Uh, so when Ibn Arabi says their verse is this verse or their verse is that verse, a lot of the awliya, what they do is they take one verse of the Quran and they contemplate the whole of wujud through that one verse. They see the whole of wujud through that one verse, and they obtain the merits and spiritual virtues through that one verse. So it becomes a kind of practice, a kind of meditation and contemplation. So then Sheikh Al-Akbar continues, they never cease praying either during the night or during the day. And then, as for Abdullah ibn Takhmist, who, according to Tadili, saved the passengers of a boat from shipwreck simply by his presence, Ibn Arabi describes him too as being one of the Manami. And his contemporaries believed he was also one of the Abdal. So at this point, the Sheikh Al-Akbar becomes an accomplished master. He is only 30 years old. And so one of the things that happens in Fez is that he meets a man called Muhammad bin Qasim al-Tamimi, right? So he's about maybe 30, 34 years old at this stage. And so this man is a muhaddith, and he transmits the khirqa to Ibn al-Arabi. And he also studies the akhbar written by al-Tamimi, on the saints of Fez, and especially Abu Abdullah al-Daqaq. What is the khirqa? The khirqa literally is a cloak. It's a cloak. It can also be a turban. And it is a rite of passage. It is a mode of initiation. So it initiates a murid into the silsila of a tariqah. It initiates a murid into the silsila of a tariqah. We don't do that these days, or it doesn't really happen these days, but this is what they used to do. So this khirqa that is transmitted to Ibn Arabi is also the khirqa of Khidr. So that quite literally, when the master provides this piece of cloak, this cloth, to the person undergoing the initiation, a major spiritual hal, a major spiritual state, and barakah is transmitted to him, which is the blessing that comes through the silsila of the tariqah, right? And so Ibn Arabi receives the khirq of Khidr from actually more than one person, maybe about 4 people. And one of them is even directly through Abdul Qadir Jilani. Now, Ibn Arabi himself, it's interesting. He in turn transmits the khirqa, which is the spiritual hal through this cloak that initiates the murids, to many students. And then he names them. He names 15 of them in his diwan. 14 of those students are women, which is really interesting. 14 of those students are women. And he saw himself investing them with it in his sleep, including the daughter of the great Shafi'i Qadi ibn Zaki. Now, the notoriety, the fame Ibn Arabi had acquired for himself throughout the Maghrib drew to him a considerable number of students, murids, disciples. They were devoted and obedient, and Ibn Arabi evokes with nostalgia the time he spent in their company and the perpetual praise to which they dedicate themselves. So this is, you could say, a perpetual dhikr, right? So then he tells us, so this is actually an act of ibadah he used to practice in Fez and in the Maghrib. So he says, there are different categories of angels. One of them are the travelers. They seek out groups, they seek out groups of dhikr, and especially those who recite the Quran, because dhikr and light, nur, is the sustenance of these angels and it's their food. So then the Shaykh Al-Akbar says, when this person is aware of this reality, he takes care to ensure that a group of people exists who chant the verses of the Quran unceasingly both night and day. This is what I myself did when I was in Fez, thanks to some blessed companions who had submitted to me and given me their obedience. Then I lost them, and simultaneously I abandoned this pure practice, which is the noblest and most sublime of nourishments. So that when they do that, then the angels come rushing to those gatherings, because that kind of dhikr and nur is their food. They literally eat from it. This practice of reciting Quran day and night, right? You will find it being practiced in Morocco and Fez and other countries neighboring Morocco to this day. This is what they do. And anyone who has visited those countries will know that this is their constant practice. And it's so ingrained in the tradition that it just seems as if it was there forever. But it looks like it might not have been there for that long, because Ibn Arabi talks about initiating that practice, which is really fascinating. So then Sheikh Al-Akbar meets a new person, and his name is Abdullah Badr al-Habashi. And this is he was previously a slave who then became a free man. And he never leaves the side of Ibn Arabi, and he serves him for the rest of his life. So from Fez to Seville, Tunis to Mecca, Damascus to Malatya, Abdullah Badr al-Habashi follows Ibn al-Arabi everywhere. Acting as a discreet and silent shadow. So then Ibn Arabi talks about him, given that he plays an important role in Ibn al-Arabi's life. He says, as for my companion, he is a clarity without taint. He is a pure light. He is Abyssinian. His name is Abdullah, and he is like a full moon, which is a play on his name Badr, right? He's like a full moon that is uneclipsed. He recognizes the right due to each person and renders it to him. He assigns everyone their due without falling into excess. He has attained to the level of distinction, and through fusion, he has become purified like pure gold. His word is true, his promise is veracious. And he's one of those men that reminds you of the Ethiopian slave who cleaned the mosque in the time of the Prophet. There's an actual tradition to that effect. And then the Prophet points out he looks like a lowly slave, but he's actually one of the seven Abadal. So by this time, even though Ibn Arabi was young for a master, just being a little bit over 30 years old, his reputation spreads quickly. His reputation spreads very quickly. And the following incident happens in Seville because he was moving back and forth. So, I mean, I know we're talking about Fez, but in this period, he moves back and forth between Morocco and Andalusia. So because of his reputation and imposing appearance, his new students always remained far too polite and formal around him. So then Ibn Arabi describes that, and he says, the respect everyone had for me prevented them from relaxing. They remained polite and silent. And so if you're too formal and polite, that's actually not a good way to learn. So he wanted to change that. So he said, I decided to resort to a trick to help them unwind. Our host asked me to help them to a little of my teaching, and I saw that this was the opportunity to put my plan into action. I replied to him, should I tell you about a composition of mine entitled Guidance in Flouting the Usual Courtesies? If you like, I could explain one of its chapters to you. So he just made that up. There is no such chapter as the chapter of breaking the rules of conduct. But you can just imagine his students nodding their heads vigorously, saying, yes, please tell us. I would be delighted if he replied, not really hearing the joke. So I then put my foot into his lap and said, give me a little massage. He and the others grasped then what I was driving at. And they began to loosen up. Their constriction and unease vanished, and we spent the very best of nights together. And then in Fez, he also comes across a man, Abdulaziz bin Zaydan, and he is a philologist. He's an expert in language, right? And so he joins his company. And then Ibn Arabi tells us he had become converted to God, but still denied the possibility of man attaining to what's called fana. Fana is when your ego becomes extinct in some kind of presence. So, for example, in a divine presence, right? One day he came looking for me in Fez and said, Master, the fana that the Sufis speak of is indeed true. I have just experienced it myself. How so? I asked. He replied, you know that the Prince of the Faithful, Amir al-Mu'mineen, has arrived from Andalusia and entered the city today. Certainly, I answered. Well, he said, I left my home along with the rest of the people of Fez to watch his troops enter town. As the Prince of the Faithful passed me by and I saw him, I became extinguished myself. And I became extinguished to the troops and to everything perceived by man. I no longer heard the clashing of the cymbals or the banging of the drums, not even the noise or the rattles or the hubbub of the crowd. My eyes no longer saw anyone in the world except the Prince of the Faithful. What's more, nobody jostled me or bumped into me, even though I was in the path of the cavalry and the people in the crowd were pushing against each other. I no longer saw myself, and I was no longer even aware that I was looking at the prince because I was annihilated to myself. So he wasn't even aware of himself. And the Almohad Sultan we are discussing here, whose return was celebrated with such enthusiasm by the people of Fez, was Mansur, who left Andalusia for the last time in 1198 or 594 to return to Marrakesh, where he died soon afterwards. So, since we're on the subject of sultans, there is an insight into the way Ibn al-Arabi feels about sultans and the way we establish our relationship to men of power. It's very sensitive, and he is sensitive to it as well, because it becomes all too easy to become corrupted by power, right? So so he says, one day there was a sheikh who was in Suta together with Ibn Tarif. And then Sultan Abu al-Ala sent me 2 loads of provisions when I happened not to be in. Some brothers who had come to see me helped themselves to the food and ate it, but my own students did not touch it. So Ibn al-Arabi is very careful about receiving gifts from men of power. The following evening, the Sultan again sent me 2 more loads of food, which I neither accepted nor refused. I just left it alone. Some brothers had come to my place specifically because they knew the Sultan was sending me food. So I gave the call to prayer and did the night prayer itself. One of the brothers, who fancied he belonged to the rank of the masters, said to me, excuse me, one does not perform the prayer when the meal is served, right? Because there's a hadith to that effect, which says, when a meal is served, you should eat first before you pray. But Ibn al-Arabi did not do that. He just went ahead and prayed. And this man thinks he's a master, right? So then Ibn al-Arabi tells us, I remained silent, and my silence angered him. I then said to him, I did not accept this food, and I have no intention of eating it because as far as I am concerned, it is illicit. And I cannot possibly tell you to eat it because I want for you what I want for myself. I went on to explain in what respect the food seemed to me to be haram. Then I said to him, this food is ready. Those who consider it halal may eat it, and the rest may abstain. Right? And the way he describes that is a part of his, you could call it, I think, if that's the right word, his tolerance, his ease with different points of views. If you want to eat it, you go ahead, but I'm not going to. And this is very characteristic of his personality and his teachings. This samaha, if you like, right? So I returned to the house where I happened to be staying at the time, taking my disciples with me. The next day, the brother in question went to the wazir and denounced me and complained about me. The match was brought to the sultan, who was an intelligent man, thankfully. So he declared, my intention was only to do good, but this man knows himself better. So consequently, I will do him no harm and will not cause him trouble in any way whatsoever. And he had the complaint withdrawn. The story of those events reached the ears of my friend Al-Qalafat, who came to see me. And so, aware of the gravity of the situation, he was afraid for me and for my companions. And so he told me off and rebuked me, saying, as far as you yourself are concerned, you have done well, but this will prove detrimental to our community as a whole, because people here will never accept such behavior. So just please be careful about what you're doing. So then Ibn Arabi says, when I perceived that concern for mere men had swayed him, and that he was anxious to effect a compromise for purely worldly considerations, I replied, wretched, wretched is he who relies upon the enemy of God. May God cease to care for the world if it ceases to show regard for his right. The right of God comes first. And there's a very eloquent Arabic to that, which is حق الله أحق. حق الله أحق. Then I shook my fist and stood up as a sign that he was to leave. So Ibn Arabi was not pleased with that um, remark. So subsequently, I met Ibn Tarif, who was aware what happened. So he said to me, diplomacy, first of all. So you can be diplomatic if you want to. Take it easy. So I replied, yes, agreed, provided that the capital is preserved. Provided that the capital is preserved. At this, he fell silent. And so in Fez, he continues his journey and he experiences a series of futuhat, these illuminations. So he describes 3 of them to us in that he obtained in Fez. And this is by reaching different maqamat. And so this maqam that he reaches is called the maqam of the bay'ah. What's called the bay'ah, the pact between plants and the pole, between plants and the qutb zaman. And who is the qutb zaman? He is the highest ranking saint of the age, around whom the whole world revolves. Why is there a bay'ah between plants and the qutb? Because when someone becomes the qutb of the age, the entire cosmos takes bay'ah with them and pledges their allegiance to him, including plants and animals and minerals. So he's describing this maqam station. So in this station, 3 ulum, knowledges or sciences, are given to him. One of them is the ilm, the science of the illumination of expression. The illumination of expression. And so this is what it is. This is only given to the perfect Muhammadan, al-Muhammadi al-Kamil, even if in other respects he's the heir to another prophet. The most powerful station obtained by the person who has received this illumination is the station of veracity, which you could call sidq. So it is the station of veracity in all he says. He's truthful in all he says. And he is truthful in all his movements and in his state of repose, sincere and truthful, right? Such a person is incapable of conceiving inwardly what he will say, then putting it into order by means of reflection, and then saying the words, uttering it. For him, the moment in which he speaks is the same moment in which he conceives the discourse by means of which he expresses his thought. Of all the men I have met throughout my life, I have not met one who showed any trace of this form of illumination. But nonetheless, it might be that such men exist and that I simply have not met them. But the one thing about which I am sure and certain is that I am one of them. And so the second science to receive, which one gains, is the illumination of inner sweetness, which is this. Even though it is spiritual, so you could say it is ma'nawi. It's not even ruhani, it's ma'nawi. It's something you perceive with the intellect. This sweetness is nonetheless perceptible in just the same way that one perceives the coldness of water. Whoever experiences it feels a loosening of his limbs and joints and a kind of numbness. This sweetness is of no fixed duration, and in my case, its duration was variable. Sometimes it descended upon me while I was doing something or other, and it lasted only an instant. But at other times, it descended on me and persisted for days and nights before disappearing. And the third type of illumination is the illumination of revelation, procured by knowledge of God and things. So then Ibn al-Arabi says, know first of all that God is too great, too sublime to be known in himself. This is one of the key cornerstones of his teaching on Wahdat al-Wujud, because you've got the Ahadiyya and the Wahidiyya. The Ahadiyya is the martaba in which you cannot know God as he knows himself. It's not possible. But there's another level, the Wahidiyya, in which you can know him at that level, right? So that means, on the other hand, he can be known in things. So he can still be known, but in things. In fact, things are veils in relation to God. When they disappear, what is behind them is revealed. And obviously, what do you see behind the thing? It's God. When you remove the veil of the thing, which means I'm a veil, you're a veil, everything you see around you is a veil. So the thing, the object you see in existence itself is a veil. When that veil disappears and you see through kashaf, what you see behind it is God. He who has revelation sees God in things just as the Prophet ﷺ saw what was going on behind his back. I myself experienced this station, praise be to God. Furthermore, it is impossible to know God in things save through the manifestation of things and through the disappearance of their status. The eyes of the ordinary man stop at the status of things, whereas those who have illumination of revelation see nothing in things but God, right? We can't see past the things themselves, but the one who has this illumination sees beyond it to what is behind it, which is God. Among them are those who see God in things. So you see God inside the thing. And there are others who see things and God in them. So you see the thing and God uh, together. So he's talking about a really interesting idea. So he says that there are different kinds of awliya, right? And their stations. So one sees God before he sees the thing. That's the station of Abu Bakr. Then there's the one who sees the thing and then sees God after the thing. That's the maqam Sayyidina Umar. Then there's the one who sees the thing and God with the thing. That's the station of Uthman. Then there's one who sees God inside the thing. That's the station of Sayyidina Ali. So he says the greatest illumination in his domain is when, or in this domain, is when the vision of God is the very vision of the world. The vision of God is the vision of the world. It's when you see the world as being God itself. I have discovered no one among the men of God who have dealt with the subject of this illumination before me, who have noted noted this particular point. Please just give me 1 second. All right. So then, just a few minutes ago, we were talking about the prophet being able to see behind him, just as he could see behind, just as he could see in front of him. What does that mean? This is the maqam an-nur, the abode of light, which Ibn al-Arabi attains to in Fez. So Ibn Arabi becomes what's called a face without a nape, a face without a neck, just like the Prophet um, and he becomes one total eye capable of seeing in every direction. So when you have this fatah, this illumination, then what happens is that you can see all around you without having to turn your head. That's why it's called the face without a neck. So I think in Arabic it's wajhun bila qafa. So then he says, know that the Prophet is all face and no nape, all face and no neck, right? That is why he declared, I see you behind my back. That means when he's leading the salat, he can still see the guys and the people behind him, even though he's facing forward. When I inherited the station and it became mine, I happened to be directing the prayer at the Al-Azhar Mosque in Fez. At the mihrab, my entire essence became one single eye. I could see from every side of myself in just the same way that I could see my Qibla. No one escaped my view, neither the person who was entering the mosque nor the person who was leaving, and not even those who were performing the prayer behind me, so he could see every single one of them. So then in another passage, he's describing the same thing, and he says that he obtained the station during the Asr prayer when he was directing the prayer in the mosque, what is called the mosque of Ain al-Khayl, the mosque Ain al-Khayl. In this picture, you are actually looking at that very mosque. Sometimes I put random pictures, but this is an actual picture of that very mosque in Fez, which exists to this day. So just a quick story. This mosque is currently under repairs and renovation, if I'm not mistaken. Back in 2006, part of the structure collapsed and killed some people, which is why they've closed it off. But the mosque itself still exists to this day, and that is it. You're looking at it. So then Ibn al-Arabi says that uh, it appeared to me in the form of a light that was, if anything, more visible than what was in front of me. Also, when I saw this light, the status, what's called the hukm of the direction behind, so the hukm of what is behind ceased for me. I no longer had a back or a neck. And while the vision lasted, I could no longer distinguish between different sides of myself. I could no longer distinguish between different sides of myself. So like now we can look at what's left and right, but he can't because to him it's just a sphere, right? I was no longer aware of myself as having any side except as the result of a mental construct, not an experienced reality. So that is why there's a there's a it's either a hadith or some kind of story, but in which the Prophet ﷺ is prays while on horseback, but it's not permissible for us to pray whilst on horseback. Why? Because we can't see where the Kaaba is. But the person who has attained to the station can perform the prayer on horseback because he can see where the Kaaba is. He can see where the Qibla is. Only this person has the right to perform the prayer on horseback. So it was here in Fez that Ibn al-Arabi meets another one of the Malamiya. And he was also one of the Autad, one of the four pillars of his age, through whom God preserves the world. And his name is Ibn Ja'adun. So what did Ibn Ja'adun do? He asked God to remove his reputation, his good reputation, from the hearts of the world, so that people would forget about him. When he was absent, he was not missed. And when he was present, no one sought his advice. When he arrived in a place, he was not welcomed. And in conversation, he was passed over and ignored. He suffered from a tongue tie, so he stuttered, and spoke only with great difficulty. But when he recited the Quran, his recitation was excellent. If he spoke, he appeared foolish. When he sat down, others began to get up and leave. And when he was present in a company, the others found his presence bothersome. This state of affairs was pleasing to him. He actually liked that. So some of these exceptional spiritual people remain hidden, but others are endowed with what Claude Adas calls an apostolic mission, which obliges them to emerge from anonymity and make themselves known, to reveal themselves in order to reveal God. So of course, you'll find that, so this is interesting, right? What is the preferred, what is the saint's preference? The saint's preference is to remain hidden. And that is such a sharp contrast to false spiritual people, charlatans, who want to be known, who want to be famous, but also who want to lead people, who have like this inner desire to lead people, right? Whereas the, I guess the tabiyah, the nature and personality of these kinds of saints, true, bona fide, genuine saints, is just to be left alone. Please leave me alone. Right? So sometimes, nevertheless, they are obliged to reveal themselves in order to reveal God. And that's hard for them. This was doubtless the case with Ibn Arabi, because we know about him, who states time and time again in his writings that he had received an order from God commanding him to guide men and counsel them. So he says, I have been commanded to teach created beings and counsel them. I have been forced and constrained to do so against my will. This is not his preference. This mission, he says, has been entrusted to me, and to me in particular, more than to any man, more than to any other man. So people of this kind make the supreme sacrifice. They agree to conceal their ubudiyya, which is the goal of every true saint, right? For the sake of manifesting the divine rububiyya, or lordship. This sacrifice often exposes them to slander, calumny, and hatred. And sometimes it becomes intolerable. This is why several times during his life, Ibn al-Arabi was tempted to evade his responsibility so that he could consecrate himself entirely to ibadah, hidden from people's sight. So then we have this poem from his diwan. Lord, I have asked you to grant your servant permission to remain hidden until the end of time, like Ibn Ja'adun, a teacher and a guide who was always veiled by God. O Lord, I have asked you for the protection of occultation, to be hidden, to be kept far away from people's sight. But Ibn Arabi's request was not to be granted. God had another destiny reserved for him. He was already aware of the fact and was to receive confirmation of it in the same place in Fez. And so This is, of course, when he makes his mi'raj, his ascension, to the different heavens. Um, so Ibn Arabi traveled far and wide on the horizontal level, but now in Fez, Ibn Arabi will make his vertical voyage, an ascension into the heavens. And this ascension is, of course, a nocturnal one. It happens at night because only the one who is plunged into the night of his original nothingness can meet the one who has no second. And so this is his mi'raj. Following in the footsteps of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Ibn Arabi makes his ascension and meets the prophets of the seven heavens, each one imparting a specific knowledge to him. The only difference is, whereas Muhammad is the only one who can make his ascension in body. So this is one of Ibn Arabi's teachings. The only one who makes the Mi'raj physically in body is Muhammad. All the saints who come after him can only travel in spirit, and that is how Ibn Arabi did it. So in the first heaven, he meets and greets Adam alayhi salam, the father of humanity, and explains to him, and Adam explains to Ibn al-Arabi, that all men are in the right hand of God. And that is, of course, an allusion to a hadith. And this means, what does it mean that all men are in the right hand of God? All men and women. That means the whole mankind. This means that everyone, without exception, is destined for sa'ada, for eternal felicity and salvation. So Ibn Arabi asks, then we shall not be made to suffer in hell? Does this mean that there's no suffering in hell? So Adam replied, if God's anger were to continue forever, then the suffering of the damned would continue. But it is felicity, happiness, that continues forever. Although the dwellings are different, the places where you take up residence are different, because God places in each abode, each molten, that means of Jannah and Nar, that which comprises the enjoyment of the people of that abode. So what Sayyidina Adam is saying is a little confusing at first. And certainly this caused a great scandal for the doctors of the law, because Ibn Arabi was essentially interpreting God's words, my mercy embraces all things, rahmati wasi'at kull shay, to literally include those who are damned. Those beings who are destined to remain in hell. So that means like Iblis, Abu Jahl, Abu Lahab, Masih Dajjal, these supremely evil beings. Those who are destined to remain in hell will indeed remain there, but for them, the fire becomes na'im. It becomes na'im, it becomes bliss. Once the period of their punishment is over, the fire will of necessity become freshness and peace. Baradun wa salam. For those who dwell there, and that will be their bliss. Why is that? So someone was saying earlier on that like if God wanted to, he could just forgive everyone, which is completely true, by the way. But Ibn Arabi is alluding to something fascinating. He's alluding to something quite remarkable that I myself hadn't thought of, and it is that not necessarily everyone, if we talk about certain people in the extreme, will actually enjoy Jannah. Not everyone enjoys Jannah. Why? So for Ibn al-Arabi, bliss is simply that which accords with the need of each individual's nature, your constitution, what's called your mizaj. Because the damned were made from fire, they will only be happy in the fire, to such a degree that if they were to gain entrance into paradise, they would suffer. To such a degree that if these people who are called Ahl Nar, if they were to enter Jannah, they would suffer in Jannah. It would be analogous exactly like to a fish being brought out of water. So that means they find their happiness in hell. So there can be no eternal suffering because God extends his mercy to all creatures, wherever they are, since being wujud in its entirety is rahmah. It should be remembered that there are many sinners who will end up leaving hell. Don't forget, according to several hadith, right? So Ibn Arabi is only talking about those few whose sins are so grievous. Basically, individuals like mushrikun, who are so grievous that they never leave. Such individuals as we mentioned before. Yeah. And then Ibn Arabi meets Sayyidina Isa or Yahya, alayhum as-salam, in the second heaven. And then Sayyidina Isa explains that his ability to bring back the dead to life comes from the spiritual nature that he received from Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam, since technically Jibreel is his true father. And then Sayyidina Yahya confirms that he will have the privilege of making death die on the day of resurrection because of his name, which means Yahya, right? Because if he is Yahya and his name comes from Hayy, then it is Hayy who will slaughter Maut, right? Because Yahya means he lives. And this is obviously a reference to the hadith where like a salt-colored ram, a salt-colored lamb, like a kharuf, is brought and then Yahya slaughters it. Well, that kharuf is actually death. And then next, Ibn Arabi meets Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam in the third heaven. And in the middle of his discussion with Ibn Arabi, Yusuf offers this spiritual advice to him. This is a lesson for you when your soul does not follow the same course in something where it has no direct experience as the person who undergoes that experience. So do not say, if I were in the place of that person when such and such was said to him and he said such and such, I would not have said that. No, my God, if what happened to him happened to you, you would say what he said, because the stronger state of direct experience controls the weaker one of what you imagine. In the fourth heaven, it's actually Sayyidina Idris alayhi salam, who greets Ibn al-Arabi as the Muhammadan inheritor, al-Warith al-Muhammadi. And he uses like a really interesting word. He doesn't say Assalamu alaikum, he says like Ahlan wa sahlan, marhaba or marahab. You know, it's such a greeting of intimacy. So then Idris tells him about what's called the principle of the tajdeed al-khalq, the renewal of creation at each instant. If you have taken Dr. Ali's class, you will know what this is. But if not, what this means is that although to our eyes it looks as if the universe we see is continuously existing, in reality, it only exists for one instant of time, the shortest unit of time, the shortest instant possible. Then it perishes the next instant, and then it's recreated, newly and fresh, the next instant. Hence, the renewal of creation at each instant, even though our immediate senses don't detect this happening, since it happens extremely quickly. So the universe is being destroyed and recreated every second. So, for example, the pencil you're seeing in front of you right now, it's a new pencil, but your eyes don't perceive that. And then the second after that, it's a new pencil, and so on forever. And the next heaven, oh right, so we're still at Sayyidina Idris. So then Ibn Arabi asks him a really interesting question about ijtihad. And my own research is really strongly related to that. So then Ibn Arabi asks him, O founder of the arts and sciences of wisdom, I think Wadi' al-Hikmah, ijtihad in what's called the branches or the furu'ah of the Sharia is lawful to us. And I'm speaking for the ulama at the age, because this is what they say. So then Idris replies, but it's also lawful in the usul, in the roots too, so that God only charges a soul only with what it can bear. Ijtihad is permissible in the furu' and the usul. What are the usul? Asking the basic questions of who is God and what is his nature, amongst other questions. So then Ibn Arabi says, but because of this, the differences concerning God and the doctrines, maqalat, about him became many. So then Idris replies, it could not be otherwise, because the affair accords with one's constitution. There have to be different beliefs, different religions, different philosophies, different systems of faiths. There has to be so, because each person's mizaj is different. And it's permissible for one to conduct ijtihad in the furu' and the usul, that means the foundations of the religion. And so when they do so, they are excused for any mistakes that are made. This is a big topic, and I'm hoping we'll come to it later on in the year when I give the course on the diversity of religions. So then on his way to the fifth heaven, Ibn al-Arabi says, next I alighted to stay with Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam, but there I found Yahya again, who had already reached him before me. So I said to Yahya, I didn't see you on my path. Is there some other path there? And he replied, each person has a path that no one else but him travels. So I said, then where are they, these different paths? So then he replied, they come to be through the traveling itself. And then again, Sayyidina Harun alayhi salam greets Ibn al-Arabi as al-Warith al-Kamil al-Mukammal. And he says, Marhaba. So Harun tells Ibn Arabi that there are certain arifin, mystics, if you like, who deny the reality of the world. But to do so is a state of imperfection, right? That means they are lacking some kind of knowledge. To the extent that the world was veiled from them, then they are veiled from the fact that the world is actually God Himself and it is His tajalli, right? So then Sayyidina Harun tells Ibn Arabi, the whole world is precisely the self-disclosure, the tajalli of the truly real, al-haq, for whoever really knows God. So where are you going then? It is only a reminder to the worlds of the way things are. And in the sixth heaven, Musa Islam explains to Ibn al-Arabi his experience of the vision of God and why he asked for it, right? So there's a verse in Surah Al-A'raf where Musa asks to see Allah, and Allah replies to him, Lan tarani, you won't see me. But then look to the mountain. If it stays in its place, you will have seen me. So Musa, he falls down thunderstruck. And then he wakes up and says, I am one of those who repents. So Musa tells Ibn al-Arabi, he explains to him the fact that the prophets call to the ultimate reality, not to themselves. Even though it's through them you reach the ultimate reality. So do not let yourself be veiled from him by the likes of us. He only sent us to call you all to him, not to call you to us. So you must have your own personal experience with God and see what this gives you. So when Musa fainted during his request to see God, and God replied, "You shall not see me," what Sayyidina Musa alayhi explains to Ibn al-Arabi is, actually, I saw him, but I saw him when I was dead, because that's connected to the hadith, which says that you cannot see God before you die. So when Sayyidina Musa alayhi was thunderstruck, he actually died. And when he woke up, he was resurrected. And in the state of being dead, he actually did see God. And then in the seventh heaven, Ibn al-Arabi sees Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi leaning against the celestial Kaaba, al-Bayt al-Ma'mur. And then Ibn al-Arabi says mysteriously that this holy house was none other than his own heart, in which angels come and leave, never to return again every single day. And then he reaches what's called the Sidrat al-Muntaha, the low tree of the limit, the peak of the ascension, and its final stage, which is covered and enveloped in various kinds of lights. When I left the house of Abraham and came to the low tree of the extreme limit, and I stopped amidst its lowest and highest branches, it was covered in the lights of actions, and the spirit birds of those who performed the actions were singing in the tops of its boughs, as it is according to the formation of man and sand. And as for the four rivers flowing from the roots of that tree, they are the four kinds of knowledge of the pure divine gift giving. And there's more, but I'm just going to skip it actually. So then Ibn al-Arabi says, at that stage, I became nothing but light. Then God made his word, his ayah, descend upon me. Say, we believe in God and what has been revealed to us, and what has been revealed to Ibrahim and Ismail and Ishaq and Yaqub and the tribes of Israel, al-Isbat, and what has been given to Musa and to Isa. So then Ibn al-Arabi says that through this one verse, he gave me all the verses and made this verse for me the key to all knowledge. Henceforth, I knew that I am the totality of those prophets who were mentioned to me in this verse, and this was for me the announcement that I had attained to the station of Muhammad. And then he says that a robe of honor was bestowed upon him, the likes of which he had never seen. Thus, I attained in this nocturnal journey, this Isra, the inner realities of all the divine names, and I saw them all returning to one subject and one entity. That subject was what I witnessed, and that entity, that Ain, was my being, my wujud. For my voyage was only in myself and only pointed to myself. And through this, I came to know that I was a pure servant without a trace of lordship in me whatsoever. So thus it was in this Isra and Mi'raj that Ibn Arabi knew he was the seal of Muhammadan sainthood, and that this ascension was the second part of a grand act. The first part occurring back in Cordoba, when he had his first vision with all the prophets present. So, to fulfill his role as the seal of Muhammadan sainthood, he knew he would have to travel outside of Andalusia. After spending some time in the region, Ibn al-Arabi returned to Andalusia, where he began his farewell pilgrimage, saying goodbye to all his old masters. His descriptions of this period had a tone of melancholy to it, showing that he intended to leave Andalusia for good. So this is the period when Ibn Rushd dies, and he does the Salat al-Janaza over the body of Ibn Rushd, who passes away in 1198. Uh, and so even the traveler Ibn Jubayr and his student Ibn Sarraj and Ibn al-Arabi all attend the funeral and burial of Ibn Rushd. As they witness, and now, so he tells us a story. As they are witnessing the procession and the body being transported back to Cordoba on a cart driven by a donkey, they notice that the body is heavy. So how do they balance the cart, which is unbalanced because of its body? They notice that the body is heavy, so books are placed on the opposite end to counterbalance the cart. So then Ibn Sarraj then turns to them and says, "Are you seeing what is balancing the Imam Ibn Rushd for his mount? This is the Imam, and those are his works, his books, right?" And then Ibn Jubayr said, "My son, well have you observed, and well have you spoken. I defined it for me as a warning and a remembrance. God be kind to all of them. There only remains me from this group, and the rest have passed away. So we have said about that. This is the Imam, and these are his works. I wish I could know whether his hopes were fulfilled. What are his hopes? To know God. And can you actually know God just through your rationality in the Aristotelian sense?" Next, Ibn al-Arabi left Granada for his town of birth, Murcia. There, Ibn Arabi met Ibn Saydabun, a famous student of Abu Madian. And at the time, Ibn Saydabun was going through his own fatra, what's called the period of divine abandonment. This was the first test Ibn Arabi had in the first session we did. So here again, Ibn Saydabun's behavior shows rather clearly that he knew that Ibn Arabi actually was leaving Andalusia for good. So Ibn Arabi says, when I left him, he wept. So distressed was he to see me go, and he accompanied me some of the way so as to bid me farewell. And then Ibn Arabi ended his farewell tour in Murcia and says, "From this point on, I will visit no one else, no matter how long I stay." So in October 1200, we find him in Saleh, northwest Morocco, where he says goodbye to Sheikh Kumi, who is the Musawi Sheikh, if you recall. And then on his way to Marrakesh, an important event took place that marked his accession to the station of proximity, what's called Maqam al-Qurba. That's only reserved for the Afrad, the highest saints. The station of proximity is also known as Maqam la Maqam. Maqam la Maqam. Because at the highest level, the perfect saint is not fixed by any one maqam, and he's not fixed by any one quality rather than another. Instead, he has the ability to assume every spiritual quality, every station of achievement, every station of realization without becoming limited or defined by it. It is so rare that Ibn Arabi tells us, "In my joy, I started wandering around in this station, but I saw no one in it apart from myself, and the solitude frightened me." So when I entered this maqam and found myself alone and realized that if anybody was to appear to me in it, he would not recognize me, I started exploring its nooks and its crannies. In other words, all the corners of this maqam. Although I had realized the station as well, as well as is granted by God to those who attain it, I did not know its name. I saw the commands of God manifest themselves to me, and I saw his ambassadors, his sufara, descend upon me, seeking my company and friendship. In the state of fear, caused by my isolation, because there can only really be friendship between beings of the same species, I continued on my way. In a place called Anjal, which is halfway between Saleh and Marrakesh. It's a Berber village. I performed the afternoon prayer in its mosque, and there I met one of the men of the path. The Emir Abu Yahya bin Wajdan arrived. He was one of my friends and was glad to see me and invited me to spend the night at his place, but I refused his offer and stayed instead with his secretary, a man with whom I was linked by bonds of friendship. So I complained to him about my isolation in a maqam, which in other respects delighted me. While he was consoling me, I saw someone's shadow. I rose from my bed and went towards the shadow, hoping to receive some solace from it. It embraced me. I looked at it closely and saw that it was Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami, who was one of the major Sufi masters who actually passed away before Ibn Arabi, maybe by some 200 years, whose spirit had assumed physical form for my sake. God had sent him out of compassion for me. I said to him, I see that you too are in the station. His reply was, it was while I was in the station that I was overtaken by death, and I will never cease to be here. I told him of my isolation and complained about the absence of any companion. He said to me, he who is in exile always feels alone. Now that divine providence has granted you access to this station, praise God. For to how many people is this given, O brother of mine? Are you not satisfied with the fact that Khidr is your companion in this station? I replied, Abu Abdurrahman, I don't know what name to designate this station. He answered, it is called Maqam al-Qurba. Realize it in its fullness. And so, after stopping in Marrakesh and then in Fez, he turned north again towards Bougie. And you can see in this map, he travels really quite extensively, right? And so Ibn Arabi forms friendship with another Sufi living in Marrakesh, Muhammad al-Marakushi. And so this wali, he used to practice his what's called a hajir, and an ayah from the Quran that you repeat constantly again and again and again, which is called endure patiently the decree of your Lord, for you are under our eyes. So this wali, he loved to experience disasters and hardships, and he greeted them with laughter and joy. That's how patient he was, and that's how much he had realized this verse in this maqam. No tragedy befell him except he greeted it with happiness because he knew what goodness would come from that tragedy. But then, when Ibn Arabi had to leave, it was the first time he became sad. And for once, sadness won the upper hand over cheerfulness. So then Ibn Arabi says, no brother was more distraught by my departure than he, at the time when I left him to come to this country in the East. So then it was in Bougie he has a dazzling vision. And he says, one night I saw myself united in marriage to all the stars of heaven, and I was married to each and every one with the most extraordinary spiritual joy. After I had been united to the stars, I was then given the letters of the alphabet, and I was united in marriage to all of them, as individual letters and as compounded words. So then Ibn Arabi was fascinated by a dream, and so he sent one of his companions to someone who knew how to interpret dreams to ask him what it meant. And by the way, this science, it's one of the key characteristics of the seal of Muhammadan sainthood. He is the repository of these esoteric sciences, and he guards them. So then this companion of Ibn Arabi goes to someone to interpret the dream. But then Ibn Arabi tells him, but don't reveal my name. So then he submits the dream to the man. And the man declares, This is the bottomless sea. Whoever had this dream will receive a portion of the celestial sciences, of the hidden sciences, and of the mysteries of the stars, and of the letters which nobody else has obtained in his time. So then he falls silent for a second and says, if the person who had this dream is in this town, he can only be the young Andalusian who has just arrived. So don't bother trying to deny it. So my companion was astounded and said, yes, it's him. So then the man asked, would it be possible for you to take me to see him? And then the companion said, I would do nothing of the sort without his permission first. So then he went back to Ibn al-Arabi to ask for permission. And Ibn al-Arabi said, no, don't return to him. Let's just carry on. So then they resumed their travels straight away. From Marrakesh to Mecca, which is still a very long way, especially so for Ibn Arabi, who insisted on doing in the Maghrib what he had already done in Andalusia by visiting the different masters there. From Marrakesh, he headed for Fez with the specific intention of finding a certain man named Muhammad al-Hassar. And God had instructed him in a vision he had in Marrakesh that he was to take this man as his companion on his long journey towards the east. So then Ibn al-Arabi says, and this is, I think, like the second last slide. Know that God has erected pillars of light. He has erected pillars of lights as supports for the throne. I don't know how many there are, but I have seen them. Their lights resemble the light from lightning. However, the throne casts a shadow in which an inexpressible tranquility resides. This shadow is the shadow of the throne's concavity, and it veils the light of He who is seated upon it, who is the All-Merciful, Ar-Rahman. I also saw the treasure which is underneath the throne. From it came the ibara, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. This treasure is Adam, alayhi salam. Above, I saw many other treasures which I recognized and beautiful birds that were flying around everywhere. One of the birds that I saw was more beautiful than the others. It greeted me and it informed me that I was to take it as a companion on my journey to the east. I was in Marrakesh when all this was revealed to me. I asked, who is this companion? The reply was given, he is Muhammad al-Hassar of Fez. He has asked God to be able to go to the east, so take him with you. I answered, I hear and obey. I then said to the one who was the bird, you will be my companion if God so wishes. So when I arrived in Fez, I searched for this man, and he came to see me. I said to him, have you asked for something from God? He answered, I asked of him that he allow me to go to the east, and I was told, so and so will take you there. Since then, I have been waiting for you. So I took him as my companion in 597, right? So what does that mean? That means he's like 37 years old. And brought him to Egypt, which is where he died. And this is why in our next stop, we're going to be looking at Ibn al-Arabi's travels to Egypt and Mecca, where he actually becomes the seal of the saints in Mecca. And we'll also be taking a look at his views, because he talks more about his marriage and his wives, and what are his views on women, which will be really interesting, inshallah. So thank you very much. I don't know if C. Joshua is here or not. Otherwise, I will start taking questions. So I'll work my way down from up if that's okay. Or you can just interrupt me and speak on the microphone. That's totally fine as well. If you want to ask any questions right now.
Can I ask? I've also written on the chat.
Yes, go ahead, Bismillah.
So I am a little bit confused because I've been reading this a lot and in the lectures as well, that he has called himself that I have reached to the status of Muhammad. So maybe I'm misunderstanding it or what, but isn't it like very contradictory knowing that nobody can achieve the status of Muhammad and repeatedly he keep saying himself that I have reached to that status. So what exactly it means by that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. Um, It depends on the exact phrase he used that you came across. If you're able to show me the phrase, let me know and I'll explain to you. But of course, Sayyidina Muhammad is a prophet. Um, Ibn Arabi is a wali, a, an, a, a wali who is an inheritor. So, an inheritor saint, he cannot be a prophet. It's not possible. So, he cannot reach the station of Muhammad in that way. He can't. He can't because he's not a prophet. So, simply put, yes, he has not reached that station. But he may have said something else. If you can show me the statement that you're referring to, then I'll explain to you as well. And yes, Yumna, we will learn about his journey to the east. So, like when they're saying east, that means east of Maghrib. So that's gonna be in Egypt and Mecca, but also Iraq as well, Mosul and Baghdad, and also in Turkey. He's gonna travel in Turkey a lot. He's gonna travel to Malatya, Konya, Haran, and other places as well. So we're gonna learn all about that. Yes, yes.
We learn, Dr. Faris, about how he impacted the Mughals and the Far East in a way, and how that reached there in our next sessions.
Yeah. So we're talking about his life. We're only going to talk about those things insofar as they are related to his life. But his impact on the I guess, like, for example, the Mughals, the Indian Mughals, in subsequent centuries is gigantic. That's a whole topic in itself. Yes. His impact on the entire Islamic world subsequent to his death is enormous. That's why there's a before Ibn Arabi and then after Ibn Arabi, without exaggeration. So he has this vision, but I don't want to spoil it now. But he has this vision which shows that his writings will spread to the entire world, and that's exactly what happened.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Sahar.
So I want to ask about the Qutb and Abdel and all
Yes.
these ranks, and there is one for each era or age or something like that, right? So Ibn Arabi was the Qutb at that era or that age. That means he's the Qutb because he's the Mujaddid as well. So is he the Qutb for now till now like that, or there is another qutb for this? And the same for Abdel as well, like you mentioned about the Abdel and Ibn Ibn what's the name?
Ja'dun, Ibn
Ibn
Ja'dun, yes.
is one of them,
Yes,
and
yes.
you mentioned many of them as well. Are they for this age as well, or they were there and then another continue, like another will come like the
So
other it will come and
so thank you so much. Great question. So no, when Ibn Arabi dies, when Ibn Ja'dun dies, the next one comes. So it's always when the person dies, the next one replaces him, the next one replaces him, the next one. That's why a woman can be a qutb or a badal, because it doesn't have to be a man or a woman. When, let's say, Ibn Ja'dun dies, the next one after him could have been a woman or anyone else, or the one that dies after that, and after that, and after that. So you're not permanently a kutub or a badal for the rest of those ages. By the way, Haider Amuli, he was of the view, but I think it's a very exceptional view because he's Shia, that those stations are permanent and they belong to the imams. So that's the view of Haider Amuli. But generally speaking, the view of Ibn Arabi's school, and Sufism, by the way, in general, the other Sufis, is that no, when one person dies, the next person replaces him or her and continues to do that till the end of time. Having said that, I'm not so Ibn Arabi has a very interesting teaching. He says that the Qutb and the Afrad, they have the same spiritual station, but not the same function. So if you say that the Qutb manages the whole of creation, and the whole of creation depends on him, the Afrad have a different function, but they have the same spiritual rank, the same level. So Ibn Arabi may not necessarily have been the Qutb, because he was the Khatam Walay Muhammadiyya. So one of the things he says is that you can't be the Khatam and the Qutb at the same time. So he had a different function. He may or may not have been Qutb, I don't know. But you're right, generally people will say that he was the Qutb. Maybe, maybe not. But yes, when one dies, the next one after him is replaced, yeah.
Sorry, I want to continue with this question because,
Yes.
okay, at that time it was all known, like, you know, the seven Abdel, the Al-Qutb, and you say that there are like four permanently are there, Sayyidina Idris, Al-Khidr,
Yes.
Sayyidina Isa, وسيدنا
Ilyas.
So these are the permanently all the time, like all ages. But I mean, are they known now? Like, you know, like at the time it was known, like the seven Abdel and Qutb, you know, and that's why we are studying it. So do we know them now? I mean, are this information available, like the Qutb, the Abdel,
No.
and yeah, so
No.
how did we get to know them before, and now we're not knowing the
Okay, so
present
do
ones?
you remember Ibn Ja'dun, right? He wanted to be hidden. Do you remember that? So 99% of these awliya don't want to be known. They don't. The only way you know about them, if Allah tells them himself, go make yourself known. Ibn Arabi is one of the ones Allah told him, make sure people know you so that they can learn from you. So then we know about Ibn Ja'dun because Ibn Arabi told us about him. We know about many awliya because certain people tell us about them. And then there are awliya today who it's very likely that they're awliya with a certain function, and they are well known. But maybe like for every one of those who exist, there are hundreds or thousands we don't know.
جزاكم الله كل خير. Thank you so much.
Allah
Perfect.
barak fiki.
Thank you.
Allah barak fiki. There are even awliya who don't know that they're awliya. There are some of them who they don't even know that they are, but they are actually. So it's a really fascinating subject. So why there weren't any women prophets, for example? You know, that's a good question. I mean, I don't want to get into that. That's a big subject. But Ibn Hazm and Ibn al-Arabi say that Sidnat Maryam alayhi salam was a prophet. So that means, according to them, there could have been female prophets, but I suspect that it's harder to be a female prophet in the sense that society may not, you know, they already don't listen to male prophets. So they may even have a harder time with female prophets for various social reasons. But according to Ibn Arabi and Ibn Hazm, there are female prophets. There are. So Sidnat Maryam was one of them. You mentioned that Ibn Arabi transferred the khirqa of 14 female saints. That's right, yes. Not saints, students, but you know what? I assume those murids became saints. Yes. Do you know anything more about these 14 female awliya or students? We have their names, but I'm not sure if I have details about them specifically. But you know, a lot of Ibn Arabi's teachers were female, and they're in his writings. And we'll come to more stuff about women in the next session, inshallah. But he mentions more female teachers in his book Ruh al-Quds في مناصحة النفس.
Is it possible that I feel that the reason that why these women saints or prophets, and they might be because they are like 124,000 were there, and only
Yes.
24 are mentioned in Quran, that I think we have to conserve our energy, our ruh, right, in order to complete the nur with Allah. And I think women already have they have a lot to conserve because as a mothers and all, they have to nurture everyone around them, a lot of response. And if they go and start preaching like male, they can easily do it like male saints or male prophets. then the whole balance could be disturbed or something. And I think that's one of the reasons that the responsibility of going around and preaching and traveling was not given to women. Because if they have children and they can just, you know, enlighten them or help them or preach them, I think their job is being done as a woman. Perhaps that could be the reason.
I mean, Allahu Alam. Yeah, Allahu Alam. It could be any number of reasons. But that's why Ibn Arabi says that don't let that veil you. Because a woman can still rule the entire cosmos by being a qutub, zaman, or one of the awliya. So they still have like these. I mean, certainly one of the ways Dr. Suad al-Hakim expresses it is that after the time of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, men and women have equal saintly opportunities. After his time. Yes, so questions from Hannah and Suhail. Go ahead, please. Bismillah.
Oh, well, my question was right at the top of the chat, and you mentioned, was it Misaj? And
Mizaj, yes.
And it was their characteristics. But is that similar to the Ain Thabita, or just a different word for it, or?
Those are two different words, but they're for sure related to each other. So mizaj, the word translates into constitution. And if you're an Arabic speaker, it's also in colloquial Arabic, because it's also a colloquial Arabic modern word for your mood, your mizaj, how you're feeling in the moment. But in classical Arabic, it also relates to your biological structure. It relates to your biological makeup. So my mizaj entails that I need air to breathe. The mizaj of a fish entails that a fish needs to remain in water and not be brought out of water in order to survive. That is the mizaj of the fish and a human being, etc. So then obviously the ayn thabita determines what your mizaj is in order for you to be who you're supposed to be. Because if my ayn thabita gave me the mizaj of a fish, I cannot be Faris.
Also one more question.
Sure.
So has Ibn al-Arabi ever discussed about the imamat, like which Shias have the concept of, that after, it's Hazrat Ali and Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and all the way till Imam Mahdi. So what is the status of them? Do we call all of them 12 imams as imams? Or their status is also about Wali Allah, or like what's the difference?
Sure. There are lots of things we agree with on the Shia in this point. They are imams, but if you're Sunni, you don't technically take your fiqh from them, because we have a disagreement about the chain of transmission that leads to us learning about their fiqh. But they are one of the most righteous beings of all creation, these 12 imams, especially Sayyidina Hussein alayhi salam and Hassan and Ali, etc. They are all extremely righteous people. They are Ahlul Bayt and they are beloved. Our disagreement with the Shia here, of course, is well known, in which do we say that they are masum or not? So a Sunni will say that they're not quite masum, but Ibn Arabi has an interesting point of view. And well, I mean, so two things. Generally, you could say that someone's mahfuz, as opposed to being masum. What is masum? He is incapable of committing sin. Whereas we say being masum is the prerogative of the prophets. Whereas the prerogative of the saints is to be mahfuz, which is preserved from satanic whisperings, right? But a saint could possibly commit a sin. Not necessarily, but possibly. But for prophets, it's innate. It's innately impossible. Whereas the Shia will say, no, it's also innately impossible for the imams. But having said that, Ibn al-Arabi does say that the Ahlul Bayt, not just those imams, by the way, but Ahlul Bayt up to our day and age, he says that because of a certain Quranic ayah in the Quran, وَلْيُطَهِّرُكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا, in order to completely purify you, they are by this, the testimony of this verse, they are purified, which means that even if they make mistakes in this world, on the day of judgment, they're resurrected maghfuran. So it's from Shab Iman, if one of them treats you wrongly, to endure their wrong. By the way, and that means like you still apply the penalties and law of this world, but on the day of judgment, they're resurrected, forgiven, right? But it's from the Shab Iman, from the branches of faith, for you to endure and to see their actions as a form of fate. So like if a tree falls on your house, that's qadr and qada, right? And so that's how he feels about the Ahlul Bayt, even beyond the Imams, right? But yeah, they are major awliya, yes.
Can I go back to the question that the sister asked about calling Ibn Arabi calling himself the inheritor of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam?
Yes,
So
yes.
I think because then you said to her that if she could bring you an example of where he states that, but I think
or something similar to see where the idea is.
Yeah, and I think maybe is it something that gets lost in translation because, for example, when you were talking about him in his ascension and he reaches and he becomes aware that he has inherited the Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but so that then how that relates to her question of how can he say that he's reached the station of Muhammad in that situation? Do you understand?
So
translation, or is it just a anyway? Yeah.
Well. So in his Isra and Mi'raj, he doesn't call the station of Muhammad. He doesn't call it that. He just says, "I'm the totality of those prophets by inheritance." So inheritance is different to forging the path from the beginning. A prophet creates a new law. He cannot create a new law. He inherits the law, he inherits their gifts, and he treads in their footsteps. So it's quite literally an image in which you see these footsteps in front of you, and you're trying to put your feet on the same footsteps because someone else has already gone before you. That person is the rightful owner of that law. So you're the inheritor. So you are lesser than that person. But just because he makes the Mi'raj doesn't mean he reaches the station of Muhammad, right? But you can inherit from Muhammad's knowledge by virtue of this inheritance. So doing the Mi'raj is by virtue of inheritance. That does not put you on his station. The only way to be in his station is to be a prophet after him who creates new law. And that's impossible.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll take maybe a couple more questions, and then any other questions, please put them in the chat. I'd love to answer them. Okay, if there are no more questions, then we'll just leave it at that for today. And thank you all so much for coming. Sil had to leave. Yeah, so let's do. Ma'am, would you mind copy pasting that question to the chat, and then I'll answer it in the chat, inshallah. But thank you so much, ma'am.
Hello. I don't know if you saw my. Wait, can you hear me?
Yes, is Khadija? Salam. Hello.
Yes. I pasted a question on the chat. I don't know if you saw it. I was just wondering. Yeah, what I wrote was, why is there so much disproportion between men and women in religion in general? I don't understand why. If you could kind of explain the wisdom, I guess, behind that.
Sorry, I didn't get the question. Would you mind repeating that?
Hello? Let me just repaste it on the group.
Oh, sure thing. Yeah. Oh, depends on what you mean by disproportionality, right? And that's a whole subject in itself. I can guess in my head what you're talking about, but if you could clarify it, that would help a lot. But you know what? The book for that, which is a fantastic book, is called The Tao of Islam, Tao. The Tao of Islam by Sachiko Murata, in which she kind of looks at that question and she has a lot to say about it, right? But one of the things she says is that women, so she's quoting Ibn Arabi again, in which he says that women are actually the most powerful beings in the universe. And that's part of the reason why their power is sometimes downplayed in the Quran, so it's hidden, but you have to find it, but it's there. So I can copy paste one example I've given twice before into the chat to show you. But that's like one way of looking at the issue. But that's a huge question. You know, if I guessed your question correctly, right? But there's just so much. There is so much, I guess, more that's also given to women, but it's not explicitly stated. It needs to be brought out by someone really knowledgeable, right? But let me know if you have like more specific question about that issue, because that's a huge issue. Why is this something hidden? Because they have the power of the cosmos. Women have the power of the cosmos, literally. They manifest the power of the entire cosmos. And that is indeed the sacred feminine, yes. Which is through a quality that's called receptivity, naturally. But that's a whole topic in itself. So I'm just gonna leave it at that for now. But I will say to you, Khadija, that there is more to the subject than meets the eye, but it just needs someone to bring it out. Yeah, and if that's it, then I'll just leave it there. And thank you so much, everyone. It was lovely to see you again, and I'll see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And Allah yabarik fikum, and all questions in the chat, please. Allah yafikum. Allah yafikum. Thank you. Bye bye.
Assalamu alaikum, Sidi.
Thanks so much, man. Bye bye.